Do you think you know God? When Jesus came, he made an interesting statement to the people of his day. In the 11th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, he said to the folks, he said, listen, he said, all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Father, and knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wills to reveal him. Jesus was talking to a group of people who thought they had the inside track on God. And yet here Jesus makes a statement and tells these folks, listen, for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, you guys have thought you knew God and you know all about God. But I'm here to tell you, you don't know anything about God. But I'm here to show you who he really is and what he is really like. Israel had gotten so far off track, so far off the beaten path as far as God was concerned. And Jesus came to reveal the true nature and the true character of God. Way back in the book of Exodus, after Israel had come out of Egypt and had been set free, God made a revelation of himself to Moses on Mount Sinai. And in Exodus chapter 34, when Moses was so hungry and so thirsty to know God and to see his glory and ask God to please show me your glory. So God said, okay, I will. And you'll just see kind of the afterglow of it. You're not even going to be able to see. You couldn't stand the full revelation of it. So Moses goes up on the mountain. God hides him in the cleft of a rock. And it says in verse 5 of Exodus 34 that the Lord descended in a cloud and stood there with him as he called upon the name of the Lord. Then the Lord passed by in front of him and proclaimed, the Lord God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in loving kindness and truth, who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity and transgression and sin, yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the grandchildren to the third and fourth generations. God revealed his nature and his character here. And what you see in this passage is a God who is full of compassion, a God who is revealing his essential nature, as John would later on reveal him to be, as love. Even in the judgment that he speaks of, visiting and correcting and judging those who sin. He basically said the judgment was just for a brief period. It was just for a short time. But my mercy and my love is for thousands of generations. It's forever. And so God in his power and in his grace revealed himself to be a God of love right here at the very beginning. And yet when you travel through the Old Testament, you see that Israel got further and further and further away from that revelation. In fact, as she went through her history, she got a lot of things distorted about God. In the very beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, God used to come and hang out with Adam and Eve in the garden, and they would spend time together, and they would walk together and talk together and enjoy one another's company. But after the fall, when sin entered humanity, and one afternoon in the cool of the day, God shows up to hang out with mankind, all of a sudden, man is not present. He's hiding. He is hiding away from God. In fact, he is afraid of God. Now, what had changed? Nothing about God had changed. Nothing at all. Something in man had changed. And it wasn't just the fact that he'd sinned against God, but his thinking about God had changed. He had began to develop a warped view of God, a false theology about God. He began to create a God out of the context of his shame, out of the context of his fear, out of the context of his sense of isolation and separation, and he began to create a God after that image. Wasn't the true revelation of who God was and who God had revealed himself to be as good and as love. But now this God that he created out of his own image, out of his own mind, was a God that he was running from, and a God that he was hiding from, and a God who was angry and mad and harsh and fearsome judge. Well, when Jesus shows up, he says, listen, All throughout the history, you started with Moses, and you went to, you had Abraham, you went to Moses, and then you went to the prophets, and you had David and all these guys. Listen, they did not fully understand who the Father was and who the Father is. They didn't have it all right. And I'm here to show you and correct a lot of those distorted and perverted views. That was hard for people to swallow. Even in the book of Job, in the 42nd chapter, in the 7th verse, God shows up and tells Job's friends, Eliphaz, he says, listen, you guys have told Job a bunch of lies about me. You got me all wrong. And he was not happy about it. He was upset about it. You've told Job a bunch of lies about me, and that needs to be corrected. So you've got chapter after chapter after chapter that you're reading in the book of Job that are spewing falsehoods about the nature and character of God, because these guys did not get it. And so Jesus shows up and he says, listen, I want you to understand that when you see me, you're going to see my Father. You're going to see what he's like. You're going to see how he thinks. You're going to see how he feels. You're going to see how he relates to other people. You're going to see his love and his compassion toward you demonstrated and revealed. When you see me, you see the Father. I am the fullness of the Godhead in bodily form, as the Apostle Paul would later write. So we're going to spend a couple of videos talking about some of the things that Jesus revealed about his Abba, about his Father, that literally shook those people, especially the religious leaders, to the very core of their being. The wonderful thing is that you and I are able to have a relationship with the Abba of Jesus. He is our Abba now. And you need to spend some time today just enjoying him and beholding him, who is always beholding you and smiling.